Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about interviewing tools and cheating. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, which coding interview tools have you found to be the most effective at preventing cheating? A conversation. That's the one. Because I I'd like to go as far as to say that you can get me too uncertain about your experience working with software development and so forth, because there's quite a lot of people who have a hard time communicating in an interview. And even though, of course, me as the interviewer in this scenario, I'll do my utmost to, well, to try to sort of de-escalate the situation, remove anxieties, and be forthcoming with what we're here to do, and try to relax and all of that sort of good stuff, right? But I mean, I've done it 100 times myself, and I still feel nervous about it. So some people might not have the necessary communication skills to have that conversation because of nerves or because lack of communication skills and so forth. And it can be anything, right? It's just that you can get me to a point where I'm uncertain about your skill level, because there's so many coulda, woulda, shouldas, ifs that can come into my mind when I'm talking to someone. But you will never get me to a point where I'm uncertain of whether or not you actually know anything about software or not. So the reason why I can claim that is because I've done the job for so many years now in so many different companies with a range of different stacks, and I know roughly what I can expect from a Java developer, a C# developer, a Ruby developer, a Python developer, PHP, like the various communities that I've worked with in over a range. And of course JavaScript, really big thing there. Front-end developers, back-end developers. I've worked with so many different types of people that I roughly know what they're going to have to know in order to do well within the company, both in a social setting and in a technical setting. Because I've of course led multiple teams, so forth and so forth, and been part of them, seeing what it looks like when you have a good tech lead, seeing what it looks like when you have a bad one, good product manager, bad product manager. Like, you mean, this is of course just based on my experiences, but I've been around a little bit. So when I talk to you, the same thing is going to go through your head as it goes through my head when you speak with someone who you're trying to connect with a little bit. Do we have similar experiences? That's usually how we bond with people and how we vibe with each other. Do we have a sort of, at the very least, aligned way of looking at how things should be done, or values, or so forth and so forth? And so if you send me a code test, like, that's my favorite thing about AI these days, where I know that if you send a code test like a cat, is like, I hope that all those algorithmic type of platforms, like, they will just die now. Like, there is no way that you can trust that product anymore due to AI being basically capable of figuring out anything that they want. Like these, as I call them, standard problems. If you have a standard problem that doesn't require any nuance or anything, any type of like almost creative expression, it's just get, a checkbox, get this algorithm to do that thing, done. That is, yeah, I've never believed in them, or I've said in videos before when I suggest that you use them, and I've never been in a company where it made any sense. I mean, it might be, if I ever get to work at one of the major IT companies, I'm not even 100% sure it's going to make sense at that scale either, because you would have to have some serious traffic coming through your company in order to convince me that this is a good solution. Today, it's definitely not a good solution. You're going to have to do it on-prem. For sure, you're going to have like a controlled environment and everything, because AI has basically made it obsolete to use a platform like LeetCode or Cadis to evaluate if a candidate is, in an accurate way, right? And the same thing can be said for quite a lot of these various tests and so forth. And so that's out. Apart from just having a conversation with someone, I'd like to have a code test where it's ideally something that is pretty small, that just gives me enough of a sample size of the individual. So what I usually prefer to do is that I create a very small project in the stack that they're basically gonna use when they get in the door, and then I try to make the problem like a 1 hour, 2 hour type of exercise type of deal. And I've had so many videos about this, guys. Like, do you put it before or after, or so forth and so forth. Like, it really depends. Like, I personally prefer to have a screening process up front, and that has mostly to do with the fact that the problem with always having the interview first is that when you're interviewing people, and trust me guys, I've done this so many times, when you look at the CV, I can guarantee you that on average it's a bit of a crapshoot what you're getting, because the CV is just the words of somebody else. And I've talked to people who on their CV look amazing, and then I talk to them and they can barely do anything, like they barely understand what we're talking about. And so that's the thing that usually dictates if I feel like if I'm going to do the interview first or if I'm going to do some type of screening process up front. And that's why I try to keep the screening process a little bit lightweight, because, for example, my favorite one is front end, to take as an example. I've had a code test, and I shit you not now, I've had a code test that was publicly available for a fairly large company, publicly available on GitHub. Anybody could see it. And they are allowed to bring it home, and they're allowed to take, I think we give them a week or something like that to send in a thing. And the entire challenge is to implement a carousel, like one of those card carousels. In this case it's front-end, and that's pretty much it. There's a screenshot of how it should look and so forth and so forth. And you would be amazed how often I get a code the challenge that I need to review, like reviewing this code test, right, where it's not mobile responsive, even though it is specified. There's screenshots for everything and so forth, but it's not mobile first design. Like, it breaks on a mobile device. That is not an individual that has any chance whatsoever to get into the company that I work for, because that is standard practice for everything that we do. So if you can't do it in the simplest possible scenario that we can imagine, well, it's not, we could have just made hey, put an H1 tag on that thing, hello world. But I hope you sort of see what I'm going for. Like, it is a conversation that will be a waste of their time, and it's going to be a waste of my time, because we're not going to hire I wouldn't hire a junior software developer who couldn't create a mobile, a mobile responsive or mobile first application. And that was the requirement for my first job as well. I knew how to do that before I went out of school, because it's a standard practice of the industry for most cases. And so those are the only two methods I really need. But even, as I said, guys, even with the code test, without the conversation, I am hopelessly lost. And that's why I tell companies and so forth, if you want to be sure that you're getting good people, you have to start at the management level. Honest to God, the times I come to companies and when I work with development teams that have iffy results and so forth, it always comes down to the same thing. They don't really have anyone in the team who can handle the specific project that they are on, because what I try to tell managers is that if you stop thinking in terms of headcount, that you're just going to have a unit of a software developer, and you start thinking more as a sports team. You have different levels of talent on your players, and to create good teams you need to have the right players in the team. You can't just say we have 5 developers, go, and then think that that's going to solve your problems, or that you're going to have a good end system, right? And then that brings up the most uncomfortable question that I ask managers these days, because nowadays I'm at the level where I can actually stand shoulder, they can't fire me, so now I can ask them things and they can complain, but they can't directly fire me without talking to our joint manager. And I ask a very simple question: do you feel that you know what you need to know in order to figure out if you're hiring the right person? It's completely silent when I do that, and that is because I know, and they know, that they don't know shit about what we do in this company, or what the developers are doing and so forth and so forth. And so how are you going to create a strong team? How are you going to do the thing that I was just telling you? How are you going to figure out if these are good people if you don't even fucking know what they're doing? So what I want you to take away from this is that the way that I figure out if someone's cheated in their code test or like the tools that I use is number one, conversation between peers, because I've done the job for so many years now in so many different types of formats and so forth that I'm pretty sure we're gonna bond. If you have done the software development, or if it doesn't matter if you're a junior or a senior or whatever, like I would like to think that I can relate to you. Juniors, because you're going to be a little bit scared and intimidated and talk about that it's kind of hard to learn some things and some things and so forth and so forth. I've been there, so of course I hope at the very least I can relate to you. Seniors, you're going to bitch and moan about the same things that I bitch and moan. Dependencies, weird specifications, etc., right? So we're going to be able to have a conversation with each other, which means that I'm going to be able to hear if you have done the work or if you haven't done the work or if you're sort of unsure and stuff like that. Apart from that, I usually have some minor code tests that ideally should reflect the sort of stack and so forth that it will be used within the team itself. Even that is not going to be perfect, because even though I can validate if, as I said, I can get to a point where I feel like, yeah, I know at the very least that you know how to do the job. It's impossible for me to know if you're going to be able to do the job even after that, because it takes a while. Like, I've talked to developers who sounded really good, they clearly did their code test and know everything and so forth and so forth. But when they actually got into the job, well, they couldn't really cut it, right? And so that's why I always tell companies, never, ever, ever just commit immediately to a developer. Like, you always make sure that, because depending on labor laws, you might not be able to get rid of them if you hire them. Make sure that you have some clause in the contract stating that there's an evaluation period, because it is impossible to know if they're going to be able to cut it. That's just me saying my experiences. And the real answer to how to solve this cheating thing is not Caris and LeetCode and stuff like that, because I promise you, like, AI is a thing now, and that's pretty much, well, if you're not using it, please use it, because I want to kill off that whole thing if possible. And the big takeaway here, guys, is that the way that you figure out how to get in good people is that your managers needs to know who they need for their project. And the vast majority of the industry's managers have no fucking clue what type of people they're going to need for a system. Because, as I've said, if you have a really, really complicated system, you're going to need some special people for that. If you have a really, really simple project, you might need different types of people. And if you're doing one type of system versus another type of system, you're going to need people who can sort of cut it depending on the situation. Have a great day.